I guess the first big question, Sue, is tell me a little bit about your life after the quake.
Well, for about the first 2 or 3 years, I spent a lot of time sitting in my rocking chair in front of the window, looking out on Governor's Bay. I wasn't motivated to do a lot. I felt a bit shell-shocked, and life pretty much, normal life, just sort of stopped. And then one morning I woke up and I thought, I'm tired of being the woman in the window at the cathedral, and I want to do something else with the time that I have left. And so I began doing volunteer work, and I never really went back to the textile art that I was doing. But I did some volunteer work, and I'm now just staying home most of the time, enjoying my grandchildren who live next door, and enjoying Governor's Bay, which for me is heaven, and being happy that I'm alive. I have seemed to have developed some health problems that I put down to the quake, because my parents never seemed to have any of the sort of problems that I have, and I seem to be aging faster possibly than my friends, and so that's causing me a bit of grief. But other than that, I live a quiet life, and I'm just so thrilled to have an ordinary day with nothing going wrong in it.
Part of that period of just, as you say, looking out the window and reflecting, was that because you had some lingering health effects as a result of injuring yourself in the earthquake?
Well, I really just had a broken arm, and it healed after 6 weeks. So that wasn't too bad, but I think it was more that I went over in my head, over and over and over, what happened that day in the cathedral. And it's almost as if when it happened, I remember sitting there in my little window seat and looking at things falling around me and thinking, and actually saying to myself, this isn't really happening. I'm in a movie. And I felt a little part of me sit up on my shoulder, and that was the real me. And I was just sort of experiencing this thing, but it wasn't really happening. And so I had really dissociated myself during the earthquake itself, and I just kept going over it and over it again to believe that it actually happened, to really take it on and integrate it into myself. And that's probably what I was doing during those times that I was looking out the window. And then once I felt I had come together again, I was ready to let it go.
Your move when you started to relive your life, when you decided to volunteer and to help other people, was that in some way spurred by the fact that you were helped that day?
Well, yes. I was really taken by that day when total strangers came to help me. I moved to Christchurch 43 years ago, and it took a long time to really begin to feel comfortable here and not feel like I was a foreigner. And which is one reason I went to the cathedral, because that was a place that was very open and welcoming. And strangers don't really interact too much in Christchurch, or didn't at the time. And I was just flabbergasted that these people came and did things and tried to help me and get me from one place to another, and I didn't know their name and I hadn't been introduced to them, but they just sort of swung into activity, and I really wanted to give something back. I mean, volunteering has been in me for a very long time. long before that, but I felt that this was a way that I could do something to help other people out.
How do you feel when people bring that up with you and say, oh, you're the woman in the cathedral window?
It's okay. That's where they are with it, and that's their perception, and I know that people look at me and that's what they're thinking at the time. So it's probably a good thing for them to say that, and it clears the air, and I acknowledge it, and it's done. Mm.
When you look back on that day, is there anything that you think could have happened differently, do you think, in your own actions or what other people did?
Well, there's a lot of points at which things could have just gone in the other direction. The morning that I went into the cathedral, I didn't have to, but I needed to start working on something that I had promised to do, and it was raining, slightly raining in the morning, and I thought, oh, do I really want to go in? And I decided, well, yes, I better get in there. That was one point that I could have done something differently. I could have gone downstairs instead of staying to listen to the radio, which is what kept me up in the room just before the shaking started. But I'm really glad I didn't, because I probably would have been caught in the little circular stairway. And I'm very claustrophobic now, and I would have found that very difficult. Everything worked out okay. So in retrospect, really I wouldn't have done anything differently because it was all right.
We have the interview that you originally did with Julie and Sandra.
I wasn't scared. I wasn't afraid of dying, but I just really wasn't ready to go. I still had too much that I wanted to do and see.
What's it like to see that again?
It's, I look at her and I feel very sorry that she had to go through that. But I know that she's okay.
I can imagine it took, as you say, quite a bit of processing to readjust and get used to what happened.
But you know, now that it's over and I've been through it and I've integrated it into myself, I wouldn't give the experience up. I wouldn't want to go through it again intentionally, but I wouldn't want to give it up. The fact that I did get through it and I wasn't badly injured has given me another dimension to life and perception about how things are, and has developed me more as a person and opened me up to things that I probably never would have seen or experienced before. So it's part of me, and yeah, it's mine. And it also gives me a much deeper empathy with people who have had traumatic experiences, and people in Christchurch particularly, but then people around the world. I'm much more in tune with other places in the world when they have earthquakes, and I think about them more, and I've probably become much more serious. I was always pretty serious, but I've become a much more serious person in considering my connection to all those people around the world. Well, you know, when I think about it, about myself and my experience, I can think about it and I'm okay because I've been through it so many times. But when I think about the other people, and their children, some of them of whom I have met. It just breaks my heart, and it's just below the surface. You know, you live your life and you think that everything is fine, but there will be a little trigger, and it's just below the surface. Never really goes away. Although the consciousness of it does, but when I think about the people that have died, it makes me very sad.